A pair of new TikTok trends has psychologists worried about their harmful effect on the population. Bed rotting is a trend where you highlight staying in bed all day long, sometimes for days at a time. It's packaged as self-care, but pretty obviously this is not healthy for you. Depression rooms have also shown up as a trend. This is the reveal of how disgustingly dirty your room is due to some level of depression keeping you from cleaning it up. So why are these trends even a thing? And what do they show us about the human condition and the dangers of social media? We have a report from a local news station about this bed rotting trend. Let's check that out.
Trend deemed as bed rotting has raised some concerns from mental health experts. So bed rotting is when people decide to stay in bed all day doing immobile activities that include sleeping, watching TV, or being on the phone. Now, experts say it's okay to have a lazy day, but people should incorporate other activities too, like hanging out with friends and family. They warn that being inactive for a long time could be a more serious mental health concern, and people should talk to a doctor if it happens often.
Okay, so pretty obvious stuff. Like if you are in bed all day long and you can never get out of bed, you're depressed. Now, the problem with this is that social media is making this a trend. And humans, especially the status quo of human existence, which is someone who is not being intentional about the structure of their life, not being intentional about the goals that they have for their life and putting strategies in place to reach those goals. The status quo of society is just being swept along by the current of culture. And what makes this dangerous is there are people who are not depressed, but they're just incentive machines. And so whatever incentivizes them on social media, that would be incentivizing them to be a part of what's going on, to be on the inside, to get more likes, to get more followers, then whatever incentivizes them, they will do, which this is the real problem, is that someone who is not depressed will begin doing the behavior of depressed people and will end up depressed. And this is a very interesting psychological phenomena that a lot of times, there's the idea of fake it till you make it. And I don't like that expression per se. Like I don't actually like that expression, but there is some level of validity to the idea that you start behaving how you want things to be, and those things will begin to take shape in your life. They find this inside of relationships. And as a pastor, one of the things I do is I counsel with marriages who are struggling. And I always tell them, begin to do loving acts towards each other, especially when you don't feel like it. And the strangest thing will happen when you begin to do loving acts towards your spouse, or you begin to do platonic loving acts towards your friends or coworkers, you will actually begin to grow the emotion of love and affection for them. So the same thing is true in the reverse. When you begin taking the actions of a depressed person, don't be surprised when you end up depressed yourself. And the other side of this bed rotting is depression rooms. And these are people, some of them are meant to be inspirational, just to be fair. Like, man, I've been so depressed, but now I'm finally going to clean my room. And I'm going to show you on TikTok how just horrifyingly disgusting my room is. And I mean, I could only watch like one of these because this is like hoarders level, moldy, terrible, disintegrating food in bowls, dirty clothes everywhere, really just disgusting rooms. And look, people are saying, I've been so depressed, I can't clean my room. But typically, like for all of human history, people have struggled with, depression, depressive seasons. And, hopefully they have good people in their corner who help them out of that. Nowadays, we kind of delineate between normal depression that we all go through and clinical depression. And so there is medicine, and there's a big debate over SSRIs and how effective they are, if they're actually good for you. But it wasn't that you took the season of depression and then broadcast it, because again, now you are incentivizing people. Like, if I am depressed and I have this like completely grody room and I'm willing to put it online, I might get thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of views. And so there's all of these things psychologically that social media does to us. One is just confirmation bias, and confirmation bias also happens psychologically where we feel a little bit depressed. And so we start doing things that a depressed person would do. And pretty soon we are actually depressed. And confirmation bias also happens by the way we carefully curate our social media circles, the people who we are in conversation with and in community with. Most people on social media are not on there anymore to try and have spirited dialogue with people who have opposing opinions that could enlighten them and help them be a more well-rounded person. Most people are just looking for an echo chamber. And when you start talking about things like anxiety and depression and other neurological and psychological issues, when you put a psychological issue in an echo chamber, what you begin to do is feed that issue. And the more you feed it, the more it will grow. And a lot of times with things that are going wrong in our life, what we need to do is starve those things. And instead we end up feeding them in these echo chambers. And people just don't want to hear something else. In John, the 3rd chapter, it's talking about Jesus coming to the world. And it says, the light has come into the world and people loved darkness rather than light because their works were evil. For everyone who does wicked things hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his works should be exposed. Confirmation bias. If I were to come to the light, if I were to get an outside opinion, if I were to actually get help for what I'm dealing with, instead of just leveraging the issue I'm having in order to gain more credibility and more attention online, then my real situation would be exposed and I might actually have to change. And so that's really a dangerous place to put ourselves in. And remember, these aren't primarily well-rounded, fully functioned, full prefrontal cortex developed 25 plus year olds. These are primarily, young people doing this. The other thing we get is social validation. People come on and they look at your experience bed rotting and they say, you go girl. Oh man, look at you just spending literally all day completely sedentary, only eating ice cream, never leaving your bed, laying still, getting bed sores. Look at you. You did it. Good for you. And really, what you need is the positive side of a loving social pressure to let you know these are not healthy things. It shouldn't be. It really should be. Like somebody needs to walk into these young people's life and just tell them, no, like this is not what you do. This is not how you live your life. And this social validation comes primarily from just sitting and staring and seeing how many clicks and how many likes and how many comments and how many shares and how many followers. And just really what you're doing is you're staring at yourself. And I do realize the irony of this as I'm looking into a camera, shooting a podcast, hoping that it will be helpful to someone. The term narcissism, it comes from a Greek myth. It's the myth of Narcissus. And Narcissus was like the greatest warrior of his time. But one time when he was out on a hunt, he ended up at this still pool of water. And in that water, he could see his reflection. He became so enamored with his reflection that he actually ended up, I believe the myth ends with him dying because he literally couldn't pull himself away from staring at his own reflection. This is an ancient Greek allegory. And how just absolutely on the nose is that for what we're doing and what we're dealing with today? People staring at themselves and staring at their echo chambers and staring at their confirmation bias until it is literally killing them. The other problem with social media, and especially with these types of trends that are very psychologically and neurologically damaging, is that they can create social contagion. And this is how social media proliferates. This is how these trends spread across the world in a matter of hours sometimes, is that there is a contagious aspect to these things. And there is a bit of a contagious aspect sometimes, literature will show, among depression in tight-knit groups of young people especially. It can happen to older people as well, but you're consistently putting yourself around depressed and depressive people. And again, like I've already said, you are feeding the very thing that you should be starving. You're feeding yourself with more depressive people and depressive ideas and depressive actions. And of course, you end up becoming more depressed. Proverbs says, walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. And There's just no coincidence that the majority of these trends are not healthy. Many of them, kids are getting hurt. They're getting physically hurt. They're putting themselves in legal trouble. They're putting themselves in neurological trouble. They're putting themselves in psychological trouble. They're hurting themselves socially. They're isolating themselves. Social media has just done far more negative things to our culture than it ever has provided positive things. And I always try to remember to say this for the parents who might be watching this. As a reminder, your kids don't own their phones. Even if they do own their phones, they own them inside your house, under your roof. They have no right to privacy on their phones. You need to know what they're watching. You need to know what they're taking in. Even if you think you know, you might not know. You need to get some software on there that actually tracks what they're doing. You need to pay attention. You need to be looking at their phone consistently and digging through it. Their right to privacy does not trump your responsibility as their parent to make sure they are feeding their minds and their bodies and their souls things that are actually healthy for them.